You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty, and welcome to the weekend. It is Friday, December 19th, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Oh, I'm so glad you could be here. This is our last Friday show of 2014, and I want to thank you all for making this an amazing year at 420radio.org. Things are just blowing up. We're getting more sponsors, more attention, and more events. We are going to be all over the place in 2015 promoting marijuana legalization from coast to coast. 6 different domestic cannabis cups, a few different hemp fests, some normal conferences sprinkled in there. It's going to be amazing. Also, the International Cannabis Business Conference coming up in San Francisco, February 15th and 16th. They just announced that Rick Steves will be speaking there. That's amazing. We'll have Ethan Nadelman. We'll have Dr. Amanda Ryman, Dr. Carl Hart. It's going to be quite a presentation. We'll be bringing it to you live, so check that out. Just follow me at Radical Russ for my personal Twitter account, at RBShow420 for show announcements, and at 420radio.org for our event placements. All right, we got a great show today. A lot of information coming your way, so you want to take out your notebooks and take some notes on this one, because we are going to talk today about desert snow, black asphalt, and the 420 group. These are some of the groups and some of the techniques and services that are used by police organizations across this country to engage in the pernicious practice of asset forfeiture, legalized highway robbery. And it has a lot to do with the war on drugs. It was spurred on by the war on terror, but like most things that were spurred on by the war on terror, police have used those new powers to go after you and me, the marijuana-using public. We're going to tell you all about that in 2 segments today. Half past, we're going to get into an activist agenda. I'm going to tell you some of the stories of people who have faced civil asset forfeiture, just to give you an idea of the horror that people are going through in dealing with this legalized highway robbery. And then in the Radical Rant today, we're going to talk about those organizations, Desert Snow, Black Asphalt, the 420 Group, these training organizations that are teaching cops how to violate your 4th and 5th Amendment rights in order to seize as much cash as they possibly can. So stay tuned for that coming up at the bottom of the hour. Also on today's show, we've got a Behind the Headlines where we're going to take a look at drug testing in the state of Oregon. You know, we passed marijuana legalization, and some people are asking what that means with respect to your workplace random or pre-employment drug testing, and it means pretty much nothing. They still have the legal right to drug test you, and most of them are going to. We'll give you a look at the details of that in Behind the Headlines. Also today, in the drug war data mining, speaking of drug testing, we're going to take a look at Quest Diagnostics. They're a Fortune 500 company that is the #1 provider of medical diagnostic services, including workplace drug testing. They produce something called the Quest Diagnostics Drug Test Index. We're going to take a look at that index and give you some of the statistics on workplace drug testing in America. But it all begins today with the 420 Radio News, and in the headlines today, the New York Department of Health is rolling out its proposed regulations for medical marijuana. Ohio has a very interesting constitutional amendment proposed for legalizing marijuana. Michigan failed to pass its regulations for medical marijuana dispensaries or medical edibles. In South Carolina, they're looking at the possibility of decrim and medical marijuana. The country of Brazil in South America is looking at legalizing CBD oil. And in Portland, federal prosecutors have filed charges against 3 men in relation to hash oil explosions. All that coming up on the 420 Radio News right after this break in just about 90 seconds. Stick around.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization. 5 of the last 9 major party candidates to run for president, 3 of the last 9 vice presidential candidates, and the last 3 two-term presidents have all smoked pot. Marijuana, the gateway drug to the White House. This is the Russ Belville Show. Cannabis Cure TV with Greg DeHote from Sussex, England. Replaying Thursdays at 12 Pacific on 420radio.org.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Friday, December 19th, 2014. The New York Department of Health released a set of proposed rules for its medical marijuana program that will soon be put to public comment. The planned regulations lay out procedures that include identification cards for users and a detailed application process for those seeking one of 4 licenses to grow the drug. Each grower would then be able to operate up to 4 dispensaries, and like doctors and pharmacists would have to take a state training course in order to work there. Applicants for the licenses would have to put up a $10,000 application fee and a $200,000 license fee, with the license fee refunded if the company isn't selected. In addition, medical marijuana would be subject to the same rules as controlled substances when it comes to the state's prescription drug database, which would require doctors and pharmacists to log each prescription online in real time. Ohioans could be voting on a marijuana ballot issue next year unlike any other in the country, involving 10 wealthy individuals who would essentially invest to obtain the right to grow and sell marijuana wholesale for personal use by residents 21 or older. If approved, the proposed amendment to the Ohio Constitution would establish a Marijuana Control Commission. The commission would operate much like the Ohio Casino Control Commission, which was set up after Ohioans approved a statewide issue in 2009 to allow 4 casinos to operate in the state, sources said. The campaign to legalize marijuana has commitments from select property owners to provide the millions of dollars that will be needed to pass such an amendment, according to sources who are familiar with the plan. Legislation that would have allowed for the legal return and regulation of medical marijuana dispensaries in Michigan stalled out this week in the waning hours of the lame duck session. Companion legislation that would have allowed medical marijuana patients to use non-smokable forms of the drug, including medibles, also failed to advance. Lawmakers had been working with the Michigan State Police and Governor's Office in hopes of fine-tuning the bills and addressing lingering concerns. But the Michigan Sheriff's Association, Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, Michigan Association for the Local Public Health, and the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan told lawmakers the bills would, quote, take Michigan down an uncharted course, end quote. South Carolina Representative Todd Rutherford has signed on to 2 bills tackling the issue of marijuana in the Palmetto State, one dealing with medical marijuana and the other its decriminalization. Rutherford proposed the Put Patients First Act during the last legislative session, knowing time to pass it was limited. Now he believes more people will be on board after hearings with testimony from families with sick loved ones and veterans who could benefit from the drug. He is also supporting a bill, pre-filed by Representative Mike Pitts, that would decriminalize the possession of 1 ounce or less of marijuana, allowing for a civil citation and fine rather than a misdemeanor with possible time in prison. Brazil will soon look into the possibility of legalizing the use of a marijuana derivative to treat people suffering from severe seizures. The country's health surveillance agency says in a statement posted on its website that the reclassification of the marijuana derivative cannabidiol, which is banned in Brazil, will be discussed starting next month. The statement came Friday, one day after some 40 people protested in Brasilia to demand the legalization of cannabidiol. Earlier this month, the Federal Medical Council that regulates the medical profession in Brazil authorized neurologists and psychiatrists to prescribe cannabidiol to treat epileptic children and teenagers who do not respond to conventional treatment. Federal prosecutors in Portland, Oregon, have charged 3 men this week in 2 separate explosions tied to extracting hash oil from marijuana. The U.S. Attorney's Office says that in each case, the men are charged with endangering human life while manufacturing controlled substances and manufacturing hash oil. The extraction process involved the use of flammable butane. Jose Rio Soto and Dennis Tapia Garcia are charged in a November 23rd explosion and fire in a gas station restroom in the Portland suburb of Tigard. Prosecutors say Edwin Stacy is charged in a December 8th explosion and fire that blew out an exterior wall at a Portland apartment complex. Prosecutors say Stacy lit a cigarette while making the hash oil. This has been your 420 Radio News for Friday, December 19th, 2014. I'm Russ Belville, and happy holidays. You can get 420 Radio on the go with our Shoutcast stream for all internet-enabled media players. Go to rad-r.us/420shout or just click the Shoutcast icon below the live radio feed at 420radio.org.
There's so much I worry about as a mom. Stephen Harper thinks that organized crime should continue to profit from marijuana prohibition. Imagine regulating marijuana like alcohol and cigarettes with a strong and clear educational message, making it more difficult for my kids and your kids to access. Drug dealers don't ask for ID. Stephen Harper does not have the kind of judgment we need to protect our children. Authorized by the Normal Women.
Despite strong public support for medical cannabis, decriminalization, and legalization in Georgia, the state spends $121 million every year to arrest, prosecute, and imprison Georgians for simple possession. Each year, the state of Georgia spends less on driver services, agriculture, and forestry combined. What else can $121 million a year do in Georgia? With that much money, the state could hire and keep 3,000 more teachers, improve roads and bridges, provide tax relief for small businesses, repair aging sewage systems, or lower taxes. But right now, that's millions of dollars of your tax money wasted on failed enforcement. Tell your representative you're tired of wasteful spending and ask them to end cannabis prohibition. Join the conversation at www.peachtreenormal.org. Peachtree Normal is a proud affiliate of Normal, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
The Russ Belville Show reminds you to never smoke and drive impaired. Hang out for a while. Share.
Welcome back, everyone. Almost 14 after the hour, and today we're taking a look at the state of Oregon and how will marijuana legalization affect drug testing by employers. And the short answer is not much at all. The state's large employers, as reported by GoLocal PDX, will still be testing their employees for drug use. Now, Measure 91 doesn't officially go into effect until July 1st, 2015. But federal law still gives employers the right to fire or not hire someone based on their marijuana use. Furthermore, Measure 91 had specific language in it that said employers still retain the right to discriminate against employees for their marijuana use. Now, it's not our wish that that would be the case. In fact, Anthony Johnson, the chief petitioner of Measure 91, said, quote, "It does seem unfair someone could get fired for using a legal substance at home up to a month after even using it. I would hope that employers would start to move away from firing people for using pot on their free time. It's something that eventually needs to be addressed." End quote. But the political realities forced the Measure 91 petitioner to include the right of employers to discriminate against their employees. It was always thought, politically speaking, that drug testing would have to be tackled after legalization happened. And that's something I concur with. It's a lot easier to fight for our equal rights to be able to use our legal substance like beer drinkers and not be fired for it than to have tried to fight for that as criminals using an illegal substance. Now that we've gotten marijuana legalized, though, it's important and incumbent upon Oregon activists to begin fighting for the equalization of marijuana. And that includes no longer being discriminated against when possible for our use of marijuana. Now, it's not possible in all situations. Under federal law, there are some employers that are going to have to continue to drug test their employees. For example, Horizon Airlines, a large employer here in Portland, under federal aviation law, has to do drug testing for pilots and such. So, or Pape Brothers, which is a construction firm. Anybody using these large earth movers and such, they have to be, commercial driver's licenses and all of that. They require drug testing. So it may not be possible for all firms. But as I read this piece by Go Local PDX, they speak to the high-end clothing retail store Nordstrom's, and they have a drug testing policy, and they're going to continue to have a drug testing policy. Kara Darrow of Nordstrom's said, "Our policy impacts on our ability to serve the public and do our jobs. It's a safety issue. I can't quite fathom what inactive marijuana metabolites are going to do to affect the safety of someone folding clothes at the Nordstrom's, but apparently that is a concern for them." As we look through some of these Oregon industries, Geldwen, for example, they're a manufacturing and distributing company, windows and doors and such. They're going to continue to drug test. Might be understandable, might be some safety issues that they're concerned with, but what these employers need to understand is that testing for marijuana, and more specifically testing for its metabolites, not only does nothing to improve your workplace safety, it may actually hinder workplace safety by distracting you from real impairment issues. Someone who is a marijuana user who is coming to work sober the next day after having used the night before is not someone who needs to be feared in the workplace, but someone coming into work with a hangover from having used too much alcohol is a danger in the workplace. Someone who is using marijuana to deal with health issues and comes to work sober is not so much a problem in the workplace, but someone who doesn't have access to marijuana and has health issues and comes to work sick and distracted and fatigued can be a safety factor in the workplace. These companies need to get on board with true impairment testing. Unfortunately, there are so many economic hurdles in the way, it's going to be difficult to implement this. Many of these companies get breaks on their insurance rates if they have P testing installed in their workforce manuals. If some of these companies have contracts that give them benefits if they continue to do the P testing regimen. But if they were really concerned about preventing impairment in the workplace, they would adopt some of the newer computerized techniques that allow for the detection of impairment for any factor, whether it be drugs, alcohol, sickness, emotion, fatigue, whatever it might be, and would produce truly safe workplaces. It would also produce a trust between employers and employees, that employees' lives are not going to be micromanaged by their boss, that they're not going to have to check their freedom and liberty at the door when they come to work. In places that institute this impairment-based testing, they find much better morale and acceptance of these programs than they do random drug testing, random piss testing that in most cases only tells us whether someone is a marijuana consumer, not that they're currently impaired by marijuana on the job. Nobody is fighting for that right to have marijuana impairment on the job. We're asking for marijuana consumers to be treated as equals in this society, equals to the people who drink beer, equals to the people who smoke cigarettes. And if someone can go out on a Saturday night, smoke a cigar, drink a six-pack of beer, have a good time, and come to work sober on Monday morning, that right should extend to marijuana consumers as well.
What are you people? On dope?
Yes, as a matter of fact, and I think the Liebermater is as well. She was trying to tell me what a man I am, I guess. Hey, we got a guest in the studio. Say hi to Chuck Diesel. Are you there?
How we doing, guys?
We're doing great. We're going to smoke it up. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
Tumbleweed here.
What do we got?
Tumbleweed. It's
all right,
Abusive OG and Jack the Ripper.
Tumbleweed, Jack the Ripper coming up next. Stick around.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with the TuneIn Radio app for all mobile platforms. Go to rad-r.us/420tunein or just click the TuneIn Radio icon below the live radio feed on 420radio.org. Get.buzz. .buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. Professionals Against Prohibition with Jen Jackson from Raleigh, North Carolina. Replaying Thursdays at 10 Pacific on 420radio.org. Hey tokers and tokettes, Radical Russ here for the Canador, a practical solution to keep herbs from drying. The Canador is the perfect airtight storage system for your fine herbs, from the half-inch thick walnut and cherry wood construction, clear-top perforated jars for storage, and the humidity bead system that keeps your herbs at a perfect 65% relative humidity. I keep all my herbs in the Canador, and you should too. Check out Canador.com for more information. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Welcome back, everyone. 22 and a half after the hour. And following up on our Behind the Headlines, we're taking a look today at Quest Diagnostics. Quest Diagnostics is the world's leading provider of diagnostic information services for patients and doctors. All sorts of testing that includes drug testing. Some quick facts about Quest Diagnostics. In 2013, they generated revenues of approximately $7.1 billion. So there's some money in this drug testing stuff. And according to their fact sheet, Quest Diagnostics touches the lives of 30% of American adults each year. 3 out of 10 people, almost a third of Americans, will deal with Quest Diagnostics at some point in a year. Many for workplace drug tests, some for hospital visits where their diagnostic equipment and such is used. And Quest Diagnostics is ranked 341st on Fortune magazine's Fortune 500 list for 2013. So we are talking about a Fortune 500 company. Now, Quest Diagnostics is famous for putting together what is known the Drug Testing Index. And let me post this in our chat room so you can see, you can follow along if you like. Every year they will release this Drug Testing Index, and it usually comes around September. And in their most recent drug testing index, they state that the workforce drug test positivity rate increases for the first time in 10 years, driven by marijuana and amphetamines. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. And some of the information on this, here's some of the facts. The positivity rate for the 7.6 million urine drug tests they took, 7.6 million piss tests for the combined U.S. workforce, and that means regular jobs and safety-sensitive jobs all combined, every job. 7.6 million P tests in the workforce. and 3.7% of them came up positive. That's compared to 3.5% in 2012. So it did go up. 3.7% of the people who took a drug test in 2013 failed it. That's an increase, relative increase, between the 2 years of 5.7% from 2012 to 2013. And the first time that positive drug tests have gone up since 2003. And Quest has been analyzing these since 1988. And the guy in charge of this, their director of science and technology, and I shit you not, the guy's name is Dr. Barry Sample. So Dr. Sample says that this increase indicates that employers should be aware of the potential for drug use by their workers and the risk that represents for the health and safety of their employees and the public. Right, because someone who smokes a joint on the weekend might be dangerous somehow. Speaking of marijuana specifically, marijuana positivity in the combined U.S. workforce increased to 1.7% in 2013 compared to 1.6% in 2012. So of those 3.7% that are turning out positive, 1.7% are the marijuana ones. So what is that, about a fourth, a third, something like that, of all positive drug tests coming up for marijuana. But in the general U.S. workforce, this would be non-safety sensitive. In the general workforce, it increased to 2.1% compared to 2% for the prior year. Now, I think it's also illustrative to think about the various states that are attempting to do drug testing for welfare. In particular, Florida, when it did its drug testing for welfare, in the 3 months that it did it, it found a positivity rate, an overall positivity rate of about 2%. Compare to that to the 3.7% overall positivity rate for the U.S. workforce in general, and you find that people on welfare are getting popped on the drug test less than people that have jobs. Now, looking at Colorado and Washington, some would theorize that Colorado and Washington may be leading to this increase, and that does seem to be the case. Positivity rates increased 20% and 23% respectively for Colorado and Washington. So over 20% increase, relative increase rates for Colorado and Washington after legalization. And if you go to this page and scroll down quite a bit, it'll talk about oxycodones and other, drugs, but you'll eventually get to the annual positivity rates, which you can see in 1988, drug positives were 13.6%, and they declined every year from that point on, or stayed the same. For example, 2003 and 2004, it stayed at 4.5%. There has been a constant decline in drug test positives all the way until 2013. They'd been stalled at 3.5% since 2010 and rose to 3.7% in 2013. The data will also be broken down for you by whether it's general workforce, combined workforce, and so forth. So in the general U.S. workforce, again, drops from 4.2%, 4.1%, and now up to 4.3%. The leading reason for positive drug tests still remains for cause. That is, somebody had an accident, there's some suspicion of drug use, 9.3% positives in those cases. In the case of pre-employment drug testing, people just trying to get a job, only 1.8% of the drug tests turn out positive, and a far lower rate if it's just considering marijuana. There's plenty of data to be found here for different types of urine testing, hair testing, and so forth, oral fluids, saliva, and all of that. You can find it at questdiagnostics.com.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with the Ustream video app for Android and iPhone. Go to rad-r.us/420Ustream or just click the Ustream app icon for Android or iPhone below the live radio feed at 420radio.org. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net.
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everybody. Half past. And today in the activist agenda, we're going to tell the stories of 4 people who aren't actually activists per se, but by telling their story, by going public, they help the cause of activism in our topic for today's Radical Rant, and that is highway robbery, the tale of asset forfeiture in America. We're going to talk a little bit more about how it's been increased since 9/11 and what we can do about it when we get to the rant. But right now, let's talk about the people who've directly been affected by this. As you know, the asset forfeiture is the law that allows police to seize your belongings if they're suspected of being gotten through criminal activity, whether or not you're charged with a crime or not. The inanimate object is charged with a crime and is considered guilty until you prove it innocent. You have to prove that your money or your car or your house was not gotten from drug proceeds or illegal activities. Our first story is the story of Mandrell Stewart. He and his girlfriend were driving on Interstate 66 in Virginia when a Fairfax County police cruiser pulled out of the median and raced after them. He was worried a bit because he's black and had a police record. After he was pulled over for the next 2 hours, he was detained without charges, handcuffed, and taken to the nearby police station. He was also stripped of $17,550 in cash money that he'd earned from his business, Smoking Roosters, which is a small barbecue restaurant he owned in Staunton, Virginia. Police just take his $17,500. The reason why he was pulled over is his SUV had tinted windows and had a video playing in the backseat console where he could see it. So he was never charged with a crime. Mandrell was never charged with any evidence of criminal wrongdoing. There was nothing he had been doing wrong. They didn't charge him for the tinted windows or the sightline, but they took his money because they assumed it was related to the drug trade. This is a common form of interdiction that happens on America's highways and interstates. And trying to fight to get the money back oftentimes costs more than what you're going to get back. Mandrell tried fighting this, was able to get a settlement with the government to give him half his money back, and it cost half of that for the attorney's fees that it took for him to prosecute. So he was left with about a fourth of that $17,550 from his barbecue business. Also, understand what turmoil this put Mandrell, his family, and his business through. He had no money to pay the electrical bill for his restaurant. He had no money to pay payroll to his employees and had no money to even pay the rent at his own home. Had to scramble, had to sell things just to stay afloat. Another story of highway robbery, Vincent Costello. Vincent Costello was a home improvement contractor. He and his girlfriend were traveling in May of 2010 from Queens, New York, to Florida. They were stopped on Highway 17 in Charleston County, South Carolina, because the van he was driving had a cracked windshield. The deputy who pulled him over, Mason Ashby, then began the series of what are known as rolling questions. See, when you get pulled over by a cop, the only thing the cop can do is stop you for a cause, investigate that cause, then cite, warn, or release you. Once that happens, the interaction with the police officer is done. But cops are trained in techniques to keep the conversation going, to just have a friendly, casual conversation with the driver. So long as the driver continues that conversation, the Supreme Court has ruled that that's not illegal detention. If you choose to stick around and talk to a police officer, why, that's perfectly legal. So the deputy began asking a bunch of questions that eventually began asking about whether or not he had any U.S. currency, large amounts of U.S. currency on him. Well, Costello told the deputy that the couple had visited a relative and they were heading to Pompano Beach, Florida to fix up a house they had bought in foreclosure. So they had a bunch of cash and they were going to go flip a house, basically. But as the deputy listened, he claimed he noticed the odor of marijuana. So since he thought he smelled pot, he asked how much money did Costello have. Costello said he had $5 to $10 grand and agreed to a search, because he didn't think he'd been doing anything wrong. Unfortunately, the cop, Ashby, found the $32,000 that the guy had and seized it based on the idea that it was drug money, even though he did not find any marijuana in the van. And before they left, the deputy made Costello take out the money in his pocket. According to Costello, quote, he turned around and he says, "Give me the money out of your back pocket." I said, "What if the car breaks down?" The guy has such an attitude with me. He said, "You have a debit card, go find an ATM." End quote. $32,934. Now, after trying to fight this, a plea deal was made for half of the money, half of the $32,000, so he's down to $16,000, and his legal fees cost him $9,000, so that left him with $7 grand out of the $32,000. How about the story of Matt Lee from Clare, Michigan? This was in 2011 at Humboldt County, Nevada. Now, Matt Lee was 31 years old, college graduate, but was struggling to find work. It's a tough job market, and he'd moved back in with his folks. A friend had promised him a job as a sales rep in California if he could get there and set up, a place to live and so forth. So Matt asked his father for a loan. His dad gave him $2,500 in cash and a 10-year-old Pontiac Bonneville to drive out there. As Lee is passing through the Nevada desert, he runs into Humboldt County Sheriff's Deputy L.A. Dove, who's a member of the Canine Drug Interdiction Team. Dove asked Lee whether he was carrying any currency and summoned the drug dog. Dove, the cop, told Lee to get out of the car and stand at the edge of the desert while the dog sniffed for drugs. The deputy told Lee that he didn't believe his story that he was moving to California because he had so little luggage on him. Of course, the drug dog alerts, the search happens, and the cop finds $2,400 in cash. When he finds it, Dove, the cop, and his fellow cop, his partner, exchanged high fives. The cop claims that Lee was involved in a drug run, took the money, and left Lee with only the $151 in his pocket. But lucky for him, it wasn't like Vincent Costello, and the cops make him take all the money out of his pocket as well. How about the story of Jose Cristobal Guerrero of Raleigh, North Carolina? He was stopped by cops in DeKalb County, Georgia. He had just visited his brother's suburban Atlanta home to pick up his two nephews from Atlanta and take them to Mexico to see their grandfather. Police pulled him over in his Tahoe SUV. Now, Guerrero is a Mexican national, but he has permanent resident status in the United States. He's a construction foreman and once served as a church deacon. The DeKalb, Georgia cop, Mike DeWald, had been watching Guerrero's brother's home as part of an ongoing investigation into one of the tenants there. DeWald, the cop, asked Guerrero a few questions, and Guerrero described his family's travel plans and said he was carrying $13,630. Police brought a canine to the scene, and of course the dog alerts. The officers empty out the family's suitcases onto the pavement. No drugs are found, but when the cop finds the money, he seized it. That $13,630 was the life savings of Jose Guerrero and was intended to pay for land in Mexico and bills for his family in Mexico. Ultimately, the prosecutors agreed to return all the money back to Guerrero, but only if he signed an agreement that he would not sue the police or prosecutors. He signed the agreement and received his $13,630 in 2008, 3 years after the money had been seized. Hope the land was still available there, Jose. These are 4 real-life stories of asset forfeiture. These were reported in the Washington Post on September 8th. The series is called, the article's called They Fought the Law, Who Won? And is part of a great series in the Washington Post, a five or six part series, I believe, that explains just how this asset forfeiture's gone out of control. The most important thing you can take away from this is to know your rights in a traffic stop. They can pull you over for pretext. They can pull you over for, missing light, no blinker, whatever it is, but they can only keep you detained for as long as it takes to deal with that stop. After that, they have to engage in that casual conversation, and you have the right to decline and ask whether you're free to go. Am I free to leave? If you've handed over your license and registration to a cop and he's come back and handed your license and registration back to you with or without a warning or ticket, you're done. It's time to leave. It's time for you to ask, am I free to go? And if you are free to go, it's time to drive away. And they will try talking to you as you drive away, because we have this habit of wanting to not be rude and leave a conversation in the middle. Be rude. When you get your license and registration back, now don't leave without asking. But do ask, am I free to go? And they do have to tell you if you are free to go. So please do. Keep in mind that if you agree to a search, that search is legal. You must always decline searches. If they say, well, we'll just go get the drug dog, that's when you start asking, am I free to go? I do not consent to any searches. Am I free to go? They cannot keep you detained for an unreasonable length of time in order to get the drug dog. Another thing I would highly recommend is if you have a cell phone, to put it in some sort of recording mode, audio or audio video if you can, to not only get exactly what's going on in your interaction with the officer, but to time how long the stop takes. That's another factor. The Supreme Court has ruled there cannot be an excessive length of time in keeping you detained. Also, keep in mind that you do not need to admit to anything that you're carrying, cash, drugs, or anything, but you cannot lie about it either. You cannot say, I don't have any money in the car, I don't have any drugs in the car, because then if they do find those things in the car, they are going to use that against you as lying or obstruction. Always just respond to questions by officers by other questions, with other questions. Questions like, I'm sorry, can I speak to an attorney before I answer that question? I'm sorry, I don't speak to police officers without my attorney present. I'm sorry, what does this have to do with me being pulled over tonight? Whatever it might be, do not answer those questions. They will be used against you in a court of law. We're going to talk more about this asset forfeiture coming up in the Radical Rant. Desert Snow, Black Asphalt, and the 420 Group, some names you need to know. Stick around. We're back after the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio is 24-hour marijuana legalization radio. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
I'm Captain Lou Albano talking to you about drugs. Kids, don't be afraid to say no. Anyone that asks you to use drugs is not your friend. Drugs can and will kill. Remember, don't be afraid to turn to your priest, your rabbi, your minister, your moms, your dads, your teachers, because drugs can kill. And if you do drugs, you go to hell before you die.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, no. Immorality in general.
Now in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. Guilty until proven innocent. How the War on Terror trained police to violate our constitutional rights for profit. We were discussing earlier the stories of real-life Americans who have faced the highway robbery that is asset forfeiture. Tell you another little story. 2 poker players are driving their rental car through Iowa on their way to Las Vegas. They're pulled over by a state trooper who tells them they failed to signal when passing another car. The trooper gives them a warning for failure to signal, but continues asking them if they have drugs or, quote, large amounts of U.S. currency, end quote, in the car. Despite the drivers refusing all searches and asking to leave, a drug dog is brought to the rental car. The canine alerts, the car is searched, and the police find $100,000 in cash, shrink-wrapped in plastic, and an herb grinder with marijuana residue in it. After a trip to the station and more questioning, 2 hours later, the poker players are released with a citation for misdemeanor paraphernalia possession, a $65 fine. The cops kept the $100,000 thanks to that legal theft known as asset forfeiture. That is the most expensive marijuana crumbs in history. $100,000. It's a series of reports from the Washington Post. They all came out this year back in September. Highly recommend you check them out. They detailed how asset forfeiture has become quite literally highway robbery. And basically asset forfeiture is when the cops steal your cash, your car, your home, or other valuables under the pretense that it was ill-gotten proceeds of criminal activity. This idea was pushed by then-Senator Joe Biden back in the late 1980s, and the whole idea was to seize the sports cars and the yachts and the cash from the Miami Vice cocaine kingpins and use that money to fund the police as they tried to catch them. And the idea, as a lot of governmental ideas can be, is a good idea, but it's one that comes with a really big unintended consequence, and that's this policing for profit. No longer was the idea to go after the cocaine kingpin. That guy, he can afford an army of lawyers to defend him in court. But if you go after the small-time drug user, small-time drug dealer, or even just the innocent citizen who has enough money worth taking, but not enough money to fight to get it back, that's where the profit lies. And it does take some money to fight back, because your property has no constitutional rights and is considered guilty until proven innocent. In fact, you don't even need to be charged with a crime, and most of these people, like the stories we told, weren't charged with crimes in order for the cops to steal your stuff on the basis that it's criminal stuff. But asset forfeiture really accelerated following the September 11th, 2001 terror attacks. There used to be this California cop. His name was Joe David, and he had quite a talent for finding contraband in vehicles during roadside stops. His talent became so legendary, he gained the nickname Canine. And the claim was that he could smell cocaine. He was able to smell it himself. Didn't need a drug dog. One of his early successes involved finding some 40 pounds of cocaine that had been hidden under some guy's car seat. When he brought in a friend, or when he asked a friend if he noticed anything weird, his friend happened to be an auto detail upholstery guy and said, yeah, there's something weird about the stitching there. And that was one of his first big successes. The word of this guy spread, and he began training his fellow cops on some of his techniques, and that spread, and soon it grew to him forming a company called Desert Snow. This was formed back in 1989. The whole purpose of the company is to train other cops on how he does stop and seizure techniques. And all throughout the 1990s, Desert Snow was teaching cops how to push the constitutional limits of questioning suspects, of detaining them, and how to search their vehicles. So by 2003, after September 11 and everyone's all caught up in fighting terrorism, he was called to Congress for a demonstration on how to investigate potential weapons and explosive smuggling in vehicles by terrorists. And that began a flow of millions of dollars in federal contracts and grants for Desert Snow, which was now rebranded as a counterterrorism program to expand its training nationwide. The idea being one of the big ways that we can hurt the terrorists is by seizing the money they use to operate. Part of Desert Snow's services for law enforcement included a private social internet network, kind of a Facebook, if you will, or bulletin board or a Reddit or something like that. You have to pick the right metaphor, I suppose, but a private network for cops that was called, and is still called, Black Asphalt. The service was sold to law enforcement as a way that they could connect the dots and share information between agencies to prevent the next terrorist attack. There are over 25,000 cops nationwide online on this Black Asphalt system, this bulletin board, sharing tips with each other on how to seize money from roadside stops. And most chillingly, these cops would trade hunches about drivers who hadn't committed any violations or crimes, just sharing these drivers' personal data, what car they're driving, where they're headed. For example, if they'd pull over a lady in California and she seems nervous and has a bunch of garbage on the floor of her car, but that cop never came up with enough probable cause to initiate a search, he would get on that Black Asphalt, post a description of what she looks like, what car she's in, what's the license number of the car, which highway she's headed out on and which direction, to alert the cop in Nevada, to whatever cops are in Nevada, to watch for this girl, pull her over, and maybe see if they can get a probable cause to search. That's how this thing basically worked. In fact, it was a tip from Black Asphalt from an Illinois cop that alerted the Iowa trooper to follow those two poker players a few miles before making the stop that made him $100,000. Now, according to the Washington Post, police nationwide have seized $2.5 billion in cash from almost 62,000 people without warrants, without indictments, under the federal civil asset forfeiture laws since 2001. And cops trained by Desert Snow and the cops that are online with Black Asphalt seized over $427 million in just 5 years. Now, if Black Asphalt and Desert Snow weren't bad enough, I mean, Desert Snow sounds like some sort of cocaine operation, and Black Asphalt sounds like a program to pull over black guys for driving. The next one will blow your mind. It's a group of ex-military that have formed one of these training groups. They call themselves the 420 Group. That's right, they appropriated 420 in the name of their group, which is dedicated to drug seizures to make money, to seize cash. The 420 Group. Well, fortunately, you'd think, we now have 4 states that have legalized marijuana. So that should alleviate some of the asset forfeitures, right? Unfortunately, no. This is a federal program we're talking about. This federal program is known as equitable sharing. And it means that local cops in legal states can simply transfer their case to the federal court where marijuana is still illegal. That's right. Marijuana can be a perfectly legal, taxed, and regulated item in Portland, Oregon that a cop cannot arrest you for, cannot shake you down for. But if you happen to have $10,000 cash on you, he can take that, even though marijuana is perfectly legal, by putting it into the federal equitable sharing program. Now, in federal court, the feds then take their share. They figure out whatever their costs are, right? They take their share. And then whatever's left, 80% of that, up to 80% of that, can go right back to those local cops. So the local cops basically are, in a sense, laundering money that you wouldn't be able to seize it under Oregon state law, but you can launder it into the federal system and bring it back to the local cops, or at least 80% of it, or close to 80%. Now, the American Civil Liberties Union and the Institute for Justice have been tackling the legal nightmare that we just described. In another story, there was a man in California, an Iranian immigrant who became an American citizen, who worked hard and eventually got to the point where he owned an office building worth $1.5 million. And he just about lost that $1.5 million office building because one of his tenants was a legal dispensary that sold $37 worth of medical marijuana to a cop who had gotten a legal recommendation, an actual recommendation from a doctor for the medical use of cannabis. Because of that $37 sale, he almost lost his $1.5 million office building through asset forfeiture. And as for the poker players, well, those guys fought the seizure. They found, their lawyers found police dash cam video that proved they had properly signaled on the freeway. There was no reason they had not committed an improper lane change. They had properly signaled. So they cut a deal with the cops to get back 90% of their money. 90%. So in other words, the cops stole $10,000 with absolutely no probable cause for a traffic stop based on the hunch of an out-of-state cop posting on an online bulletin board for police treasure hunting. Wow. Does that not just blow your mind? And now these two guys have hired a new lawyer to pursue civil rights charges. And this is where it gets interesting. By pursuing this as a civil rights issue, might be able to get some nationwide action on this. The charges are against Desert Snow and Black Asphalt for training and incentivizing police officers to violate Americans' Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. It's an amazing, incredible story. Again, it's on the Washington Post. If you go to their website and search for civil asset forfeiture, I'm sure you'll find these stories. They're pretty long, but very, very well written, very well researched. Hey, folks, that's all the time we got, but we got Chuck Diesel in the studio. We're going to have some fun for our Friday. Stick around. Hour 2 is next. For everyone here at 420radio.org, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it.